It's been said the world's a stage, and we're just performers. But how do we know our next move? How do we orchestrate our lives? Whether our actions are conscious or subconscious, one thing is certain. Choreography is controlled by our brain. In this program, you're going to learn about the central nervous system and its primary components, the brain and the spinal cord. You'll see how these structures interpret stimuli and regulate responses. And you'll come to understand how this organ is very much like this mixing console. Cables and connectors bring incoming signals from instruments and microphones to this control center where they're processed and then returned back to the system as responses. This mixing board is very much like the human central nervous system. In the theater of human interaction, the brain is on set. This organ is the control center of an astounding tissue complex, the human neural system.
The human neural system can be divided into the peripheral and central systems. The central nervous system, or CNS, includes the brain and spinal cord, located inside the skull and vertebral column. Both the central canal of the spinal cord and the ventricles in the brain are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid circulates hormones, nutrients, and white blood cells. It provides nutrition, protection, and also acts as a shock absorber. The tissue of the central nervous system is made up of neurons and supporting cells. Neurons are the basic unit structure that carry the electrochemical signals from location to location throughout the nervous system. Sensory neurons conduct information from the external and internal environment to the spinal cord and brain. Motor neurons carry information in the opposite direction from the brain and spinal cord to muscles and glands, which carry out their commands and produce responses. Synapses between neurons enable them to communicate with each other. One neuron can synapse with thousands of other neurons at the same time. This allows for a tremendous variety of responses, from complex actions to simple reflexes.
One example of a simple reflex action is the startle reflex. A sudden sound is detected by the ear, which converts the sound waves into nerve signals. These impulses travel along the auditory nerve, the lower hearing center in the brainstem.
Mr. Leon, can you take it easy with the feedback?
Yeah, no kidding.
Sorry guys, sorry. Hey, but you know, you're getting feedback all the time. Here, or here. Signals are being processed and sent along motor neurons in the spinal cord to
Neck muscles, which will then turn your head. That's the head turning, or the
Startle reflex.
That's right. Now that's using your heads.
The principal structure of the central nervous system is the brain. This elaborate architecture of tissue governs every thought we have, from simple reflexes to complex and creative patterns of thinking. Enables perception, movement, intellect, emotion, as well as homeostasis. There are about 100 billion nerve cells in the human brain, which is roughly the same number as stars in our Milky Way. These neurons are intricately connected in bundles or tracts of axons and dendrites. Within the brain, there are two types of matter. White matter in the brain is named for the color of the fatty myelin sheaths that surround the axonic processes of the neurons. Unmyelinated axons and cell bodies are a grayish color and are often called the brain's gray matter. In addition to the gray and white matter, you will learn that the brain also contains basal ganglia.
I can't believe there are over 100 billion neurons in this brain.
Actually, you've got half a brain there.
Hey,
In your hand, that is. And so let's say 50 billion.
it's still a handful.
It's really a hemisphere. And because the brain is bilaterally symmetrical, the other side,
Hemisphere.
The other hemisphere look exactly the same, like a mirror image.
that's right. Here, take a look at this. All right? So both hemispheres appear to be symmetrical and the same. But really, they each have lobes that carry out different functions.
I believe the left hemisphere of the human brain is the logical side, sir.
Well, thank you, logical one. The left hemisphere is really involved with mathematical and logical thought. What about the right?
Oh, well, that's the artistic side.
Right on. So imagination and creativity reside primarily in the right hemisphere. It's interesting, though, that most of the sensory and motor neurons cross over. That is, from one hemisphere to the opposite side of the central or peripheral nervous system. So if sensory receptors in Kasia's left hand would send information, it would travel up here, Talad, to the right cortex of her brain. And conversely then, motor impulses originating from the right cortex would then generate muscular activity on the left side of her body. The division of labor which occurs between the two cerebral hemispheres, making up the cerebrum, is called lateralization. With lateralization, each hemisphere controls different body functions. For example, in most people, the left hemisphere has more control over language abilities, math skills, and logic, whereas the right hemisphere is more involved with visual spatial skills, emotion, intuition, and artistic abilities. Despite their different functions, the two hemispheres are identical in structure. They transfer information and communicate with each other through a structure called the corpus callosum.
Okay, so it's the neuron cell bodies that make up the gray matter, but what of the white matter? And what's the difference again?
All right. This white tissue here, all right, is myelinated. That means that the axons of the neuron are covered with a myelin sheath. It speeds up neural conduction. It's in the inner part of the brain. The gray matter, all right, or the non-myelinated part of the brain, is found here on the outer parts. These cell bodies make up the cerebral cortex. Now, it's important to protect that gray matter, right?
Right, that's why we have skulls.
That's right. It's like a helmet. And beneath the helmet are three protective layers, or membranes, called meninges. These meninges form an envelope around the brain and the spinal cord, containing the cerebral spinal fluid and protecting the delicate tissue.
So it's under these meninges where we find the meat of the matter.
That's a good idea, because now it's the matter that we're going to meet.
The brain is divided into three regions: the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Perhaps the most complicated neural processing occurs in the forebrain. This region consists of cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus, basal ganglia, and the 5 lobes of the cerebral cortex. Many autonomic or involuntary functions dealing with emergency situations and energy conservation are controlled by the hypothalamus. Below the cortex, the basal ganglia relays and coordinates motor impulses. The cerebral cortex is divided into lobes: the frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, and the insula lobe. By mapping and monitoring the cortex and using data from brain injuries, the functions of the cortical regions are now well known. Abstract thinking and motor control are processed in the frontal lobe. Hearing, speech, and emotions are processed in the temporal area. Other centers throughout the cortex interpret our sensory perceptions. The upper portion of the brainstem is the midbrain. It receives and integrates sensory information from the medulla oblongata, sending to specific regions of the forebrain. The reticular formation of the midbrain is also a vital center. It stimulates wakefulness during emergencies by activating the cortex. The hindbrain includes the
medulla oblongata, pons, and the cerebellum. Various autonomic functions are controlled by the medulla oblongata and the pons. Pons also transmits information between the cerebrum and the spinal cord.
I always knew I'd get ahead in life. How about you, Prahlad?
Well, it's a little lightheaded.
He's like the scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, he needs a hat.
No, he needs a brain.
Precisely, Kasia, and that's why this part of the test is called the brain game, and it's a two-parter. What you have to do is identify the principal structures of the brain and show where they're located in the skull. Any questions on that?
No.
All right, go for it.
Okay.
Okay, let's just one first.
Like somewhere right here.
Yeah, it kind of has a curve in it. Actually, I think it's turned around.
Yeah, that looks right now.
Kind of curved in the front,
Yeah.
like that. Well, the front's kind of curved.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. Yeah, somewhere around here. And obviously fits here.
Yeah. I think we're done.
Let's see what you've got here. Let's see, that's pretty good. Looks like you got the part in the right places. All right, maybe we'll start with this one, with this view here. Tell me what these parts are.
Okay, this right here would be the cerebellum.
And this is the corpus callosum because it relays information between the two hemispheres.
And this would be the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and this is the brainstem here. And in it is the pons and the medulla oblongata.
That's right, medulla oblongata. All right, so where will we find this view inside the head?
Okay, I think this makes up the inside of the head.
Okay, good. All right, let's move over to this view. What are the names of those structures there?
Well, this is the frontal lobe because it's in the front.
Okay, and this would be the parietal lobe.
And this is the temporal lobe.
Yeah, temporal lobe.
Okay, and that's the occipital lobe.
That's correct. And?
Okay, all these lobes together make up the cerebral cortex. So if we put them on there, that's what it would look like from the side of the head.
Homeostatic functions such as heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and digestion are controlled by the medulla oblongata. The medulla also controls swallowing, sneezing, and coughing. Pons work with the medulla to control some of these activities as well. But it also transmits information between the cerebellum and the midbrain, and between the cerebrum and the spinal cord.
Let's see if we remember what about this? What is structure here?
So that's the cerebellum.
Does it have something to do with movement?
Yeah, that's right. Equilibrium and movement are coordinated by the cerebellum. It works closely with the organs of balance in the inner ear. Once we've learned the sequence of action, the cerebellum enables us to repeat that action without much conscious thought.
Let's take a look at the inside again.
What's this part here?
Yeah, that's part of the forebrain. Remember? The thalamus and the hypothalamus? Sensory information from the hypothalamus is relayed by the thalamus to different sensory areas of the cerebrum. The hypothalamus controls a number of important homeostatic functions. These include body temperature, water balance, appetite, sexual activity, fear, and rage. It also produces the posterior pituitary hormones and releases hormones that control the secretions of the anterior pituitary.
Well, let's put the cerebrum back in place.
Yeah, that's good. As interdependent structures, the lobes of the brain associate with each other by exchanging neural information. Well, looks like your brain surgery is successful.
Yeah, he's never felt better.
A great deal of electrical activity goes on in the cerebrum. It is monitored with an electroencephalograph. Brain waves are different during various levels of alertness and excitement. When the brain is stimulated with electrodes, the reactions provide clues to the functions of different regions in the brain. One form of disturbance to brain function is epilepsy. Epilepsy is an impairment caused by mild to severe electrical disorders in the brain. The irregular electrical activity can be monitored and measured to better understand the disorder and to improve treatment techniques.
Diagnosis and treatment of brain and spinal cord disorders are among the most dramatic advances in medical technology. Various imaging techniques allow detailed observation of internal structures. This helps in the treatment of disease and in the diagnosis of lesions or anomalies in the CNS.
Well, first of all, maybe we should look at what MRI stands for. It's magnetic resonance imaging. So obviously we have a magnetic field, we have some resonance happening, and we take pictures. So as far as the magnetic portion is concerned, we have a magnet, and what we use is a superconductive magnet, which is a high field. And in order to reach a high field, you need to use some type of a superconductive wire. In our particular case, we use niobium titanium coiled wire, and it's supercooled in liquid helium. And liquid helium, or helium in its liquid form, is 9 degrees Kelvin or minus 269 degrees Celsius. So it's very, very cold. And as long as the wire is kept at that temperature, there is no resistance through it. If you run electricity through a wire, you will encounter resistance. So in order to have more power, you need to push more electricity through. More electricity, the more resistance you get. So how we get rid of resistance to achieve the high magnetic field is by supercooling the wire itself. So once the electricity is put in the magnet, its half-time is about 200 years. So this magnet, once it's turned on with electricity in it, it stays on forever. CT scanner is shaped more like a donut with a big ring that your body goes through, and so you don't have the constraint of feeling so claustrophobic. Whereas the MR scanner, it's a small tunnel that's, as I said, 6.5 feet long and 22 inches wide. There's a big difference. But it's not a dark tunnel. It is a lit tunnel. There's light inside of it, and it's an open tube at both ends. And the CT scanner uses radiation, X-rays, whereas in MR we use magnetic fields and radio frequency pulses. So there's no radiation at all involved in MRI. So it's a much safer way of imaging the body. Because the CT scanner uses X-rays, they're limited as far as the planes that they can take their images by the physical positioning of the X-ray tubes. So they can only take transaxial slices, for example. Whereas in MRI, because we use a magnetic field and radio frequencies, we can excite the protons and change the magnetic field in any plane that we wish, whether it's axial, coronal, sagittal, or any other plane for that matter. And that's one of the big advantages of MRI over the CT scanner, because if you're, for example, planning the treatment of a brain tumor, you're able to give the surgeon pictures of all the different ways that they can approach that tumor. It's much more viable for them than to just have a CAT scan to go by, which gives them one plane. A lot of people think of MRI as putting the body inside the scanner and us being able to take a picture of the whole body, but it doesn't quite work that way. Even though the whole body goes inside the tunnel, only a very small area can be imaged at once, and it's physically dependent on the size of the coil that you can use. The biggest coil is the body coil, which is inside the magnet itself, and it's 48 centimeters long. You also want to be closest to your anatomy as possible. The closer you are to the body with your antenna, the better your pictures are going to be. The farther away you are from the body, the less signal you're going to be able to catch. Looking at an MR image is basically the same as if we were to take a cadaver and cut it open. It would be the same detail.
Our nervous systems are a complex network of biological wiring. When connections are severed, nerve fibers are not very forgiving.
At the time of the accident, when I was grabbing my legs, asking who it is, I knew exactly that my life had changed at that time. And I knew that I had to live the rest of my life, so I decided that I was going to still be successful in whatever I did. And I believe that what I've done between then and this point now, that I'm successful. I've finished school, and my life is pretty well normal. I have physical things to do, friends, social life, and good.
In the biochemistry of the brain, there are over 50 different neurotransmitters. These compounds are the chemical messengers that cross a multitude of brain synapses and excite or inhibit postsynaptic neurons. The variety of neurotransmitters in the brain includes amino acids like glutamic acid, glycine, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, peptides like substance P, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and endorphins. Norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin serve as neurotransmitters in the structures that regulate moods, motivation, feelings, self-awareness, consciousness, and personality. Norepinephrine, or noradrenaline, as it is sometimes called, is produced in the reticular formation. Dopamine is also released there. It is involved with the control of muscular activity, goal-directed behaviors, self-awareness, planning, and anxiety. Functions of these chemicals lead to neurological diseases.
Alzheimer's disease, or AD, is a degenerative disorder that attacks the brain, resulting in dementia and other personality or behavioral changes. Its most noticeable symptoms are progressive, irreversible declines in intellectual functioning, memory loss, and an inability to carry out normal routine activities. Eventually, AD patients are unable to care for themselves. 3 factors which may lead to Alzheimer's are aging, a genetic disposition towards the disease, and head trauma. Researchers have noted a higher incidence of nerve cell death and the inability of nerve cells to communicate with each other in AD patients. A deficiency of acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter necessary for the proper transmission of neural synapses, has been identified. As a result, the nucleus basalis sends less input to the cortex and limbic systems. The limbic system encompasses the entire neuron circuitry, including the hypothalamus that controls emotional behavior and motivational drives. This input leads to a deterioration of recognition and memory, as well as other degenerative symptoms typical of AD patients.
Another cause of brain disorders is trauma or brain injury. Suzanne Jackett works with survivors of head injury at the Southern Alberta Society for Brain Injured.
Brain injury occurs when there's been damage to the brain. Could be caused from a car crash or somebody falling off their bicycle, so something of traumatic nature. It could also be a stroke or an aneurysm, sometimes a lack of oxygen to the brain, drowning or a near drowning, where oxygen has been cut off to the brain for some period of time, and that results in the brain being damaged.
I was in an automobile accident. I was rear-ended, and at the time I was at a T intersection and I was looking to the right and I didn't see the vehicle coming behind, and my face impacted with the steering column, and it resulted in a closed head injury. I lost my short-term memory. My divided attention was gone. My word retrieval, and I can't remember. After the accident, I returned to work to find out everything had changed. I would think that I had done work, and in my brain I had actually thought about the process of doing the work, but I actually hadn't done the input of the work. And I couldn't remember. There would be people phoning for meetings and they would say, "Where are you?" And I'd say, "You never called me, you never told me." And I continually got myself deeper and deeper into trouble because I was losing files, and eventually with brain injury, a lot of people's emotions are affected. So eventually I would be crying, or I would be laughing hysterically, or I'd be mad and being screaming at somebody for my things. And they eventually sent me to a psychologist to try and figure out what the problem was. I think what people have to realize is that even though you're not physically disabled, a disability isn't always something you can see up front. Generally, people can deal with what they can see, but what they can't see, they just assume that everybody is normal. Maybe that's not the right word to use, but when you have a head injury, you're not really normal. You're just a little bit different than the person next to you. When I lost my person, it was like losing a close friend. It was like actually a death of someone that I knew. You just got to pick up and go on. I mean, life isn't over just because you have a head injury. It's just like a new beginning.
It looks like a lot of blood around here.
What do you think that could be from?
Looks like an artery.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Let's go over here. This tissue's really soft, huh?
Yeah, you know, the brain's protected by the skull and the meninges, but I wonder, is there anything else that protects the brain?
That's a good question, Kasia. Actually, the brain is protected against chemical imbalances in the blood by a unique structure called the blood-brain barrier. Special structures surround blood vessels like this one and restrict the entry of harmful substances that may be circulating in the blood.
Some substances can enter the brain, right?
Oh, yeah. This equilibrium is upset, however, when some unwelcome substances are permitted entry to brain cells. Nicotine and other non-prescription drugs do cross the barrier and alter brain chemistry. Scientists are exploring where and how these substances bind to molecules in the brain and how they affect body function.
The effects of alcohol or ethanol on the brain has been researched extensively. Ethanol is a depressant. Current research has revealed that ethanol affects brain neurotransmitters, alters neural membranes. As physical properties are altered, the transport of ions across neural membranes is impaired. Ion movement is the molecular basis of function in neural systems. The impairment of neural processes has dramatic effects on a wide variety of responses controlled by our central nervous system.
Man, there's a lot going on in there. Just thinking about it gives me a splitting headache, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What's with headaches anyways?
Well, you know what's weird? The brain doesn't have any pain receptors.
Really?
Yeah, that's true. What we experience as a normal headache is actually referred pain from outside of the brain. Like you said, the brain itself doesn't have any pain receptors. So it interprets sensations from elsewhere in the body as discomfort in the head. Even with advancing research and new technology, much of the central nervous system remains a mystery. Our mind boggles itself. What is the nature of reason and emotion? What are ideas? The brain is a structure of supreme complexity and subtlety, unsurpassed, controlling our every action and performance on the stage of life.
Some of us are